So just as a refresher, the European Commission was plotting a fine as large as $6.4 billion against Google, and this was, of course, roughly about a tenth of their annual revenue. And
it apparently slipped my mind. That's actually quite large.
it's quite large, yeah. And just a refresher, and this is a quote from the EC, Google gives systematic favorable treatment to its comparison shopping product, currently called Google Shopping, in its general search result pages, e.g. by showing Google Shopping more prominently on the screen. It may therefore artificially divert traffic from rival comparison shopping services and hinder their ability to compete on the market.
Wow.
So this is an anti-competitive claim against them. And, not much more to it than that.
They are more than willing to use Russia's Yandex.
Mm-hmm.
I would think. I don't know. They're more than capable of doing that if they want.
This is something we talked about last time on the show. There is kind of the counter argument to all this. Like, yes, they have a 90% market share in desktop search in Europe, but like they build a really great product. Why wouldn't they want to feature some of their really great stuff in there? EC is also currently looking into some issues with Google Android, and this has to do a little bit more with app bundling and whether Google is doing some anti-competitive measures based on like forced app bundling and possibly crowding out potential competitors with things like maps and things like that are forced onto the platform when they enter an agreement with the smartphone manufacturer because their operating system would power the device.
This actually seems, actually, okay. So let's do the what's up now portion because it seems like the Android portion, it seems like you might have a better case with Android because they run the actual operating system and that has a Microsoft-y feel to it.
Yeah.
So, yeah. Anyway, okay. So what's going on with this stuff now?
Yeah, so this was probably one of the more interesting, like really in the weeds tech things that I've read in a while. I was talking with Vince a couple weeks ago when he filled in for you about the patent disputes back and forth between Apple and Samsung and how those have been kind of put to bed recently, but that it was kind of a side of tech that a lot of investors don't really get a sense for unless you really seek it out.
Tech wars.
It's one of these things that kind of drag on, and it's kind of like the dark underbelly of tech, right? That's what I joked about before we started doing the show, and this is kind of along the same lines where it's like it's really in the weeds and it's kind of insidery, but if you like that, then this is a really fun story to watch. And there was this kind of scathing article put together by The Guardian that went out earlier this week. The headline was, "Revealed how Google enlisted members of U.S. Congress it bankrolled to fight $6 billion EU antitrust case." And so that is maybe a little harsher than the reality, but that's still pretty loaded. And
so they're calling Congress to call up their counterparts in Europe to...
Yeah. Calling in the infantry, right? To help them out, or the cavalry to help them out. Some of the bullet points from this story. So between December 2014 and June 2015, according to The Guardian, Google held more high-level meetings with commission officials than any other company. From 2010 to 2014, Google has more than quadrupled its annual lobbying spend in Brussels, which is where the EC case is based. It's up to over $4 million, which really isn't that much given the scope of Google. No. But I think that ramp up is just a testament to what they're looking to do in terms of influencing policy there and the decision of the regulatory body. Google has employed several former EU officials as in-house lobbyists and has funded European think tanks and university research favorable to its position as part of a broader campaign.
Whoa. What are they doing with universities? This is crazy.
Yeah, so I mean, this is looking for research and academic publishing that is favorable.
You're an economics professor. Come up with a good paper.
Yeah, and last year, Google spent twice as much on lobbying in Brussels than Apple, Facebook, Yahoo, and Twitter and Uber combined.
I don't buy the Uber thing because they had that whole Paris altercation with the taxi. Yeah. Anyway,
but so it's very clear that and this is something we talked about when we first brought it up was Google said they sent out a memo to everyone around. They're like in-house, we're going to fight this. We think that there's no grounds for this. This is something that we're going to go to battle on. And I think that this scale up here is just kind of a testament to, they are rounding up the cavalry, like I said, and just coming at them with everything they've got. And some members, some publicly elected officials from the U.S. also seem to have been involved. There were some memos that The Guardian got a hold of. One of them in particular some U.S. members of Congress, many of whom have received campaign funding from Google, wrote to the EC in November, basically called some of the acts that they're going after ones that would deter continued innovation and investment from U.S.-based internet companies.
Okay.
Yeah. So, so there's a lot going on there. I think it's just really fascinating to see how big tech companies combat unfavorable regulatory environment. So that's kind of what's going on the Google Shopping side. Unfortunately, we're not going to have any resolution on this for years. So as much as I'd love to wrap this up and put a bow on it for the holidays,
next holiday season.
Yes. So maybe we'll check in on it then. But on the Android issue that we mentioned earlier, another not a ton to update on there. There was a Reuters report in September that said the EC is still yet to determine whether it will charge Google with market abuse with its Android mobile efforts. So that is another kind of ongoing thing.
Is this, refresh everybody's memory, was this as bad as what, and I alluded to this earlier, but you remember in the 90s, Microsoft was charged with blatantly blocking Netscape and putting Internet Explorer on their operating systems?
Yeah, or do you mean
is this that bad?
Do you mean in terms of the fine itself?
Yes.
So,
or in what Google was doing and the fines and everything?
Yeah, and so for total dollars, I think the original fine that was levied against Microsoft was like $600 million or something like that. So, I mean, adjust for inflationary measures. But I think
even then, it'd be like $700 or $800 million now.
But I think what they wound up paying was multiples of that.
Oh, really?
Because they dragged it out and weren't compliant for a long time.
Oh, that's
and
fun. Okay.
Thought that they were being compliant. So I think the final settlement was like 1.5 or 2.
Okay.
Billion. Yeah.
Wow.
So still about a third of what Google's looking at in terms of unadjusted dollars, at least.
Cool.